So let's find out about using Blueprint Timeline. In this video, the Timeline node is a Blueprint feature that has a curve editor in it. This is a perfect way of defining how our door is going to be moving graphically in a graphical interface. I'll be showing you how to use these curves in Blueprint, and then we'll be setting a rotation of the door from a timeline. What does all this mean? It means that by the end of the video, we will have a door that opens like that, nice and smoothly. Awesome, let's go get it done. So let the fun begin. Let's start making our doors swing according to a curve. So over into the door blueprint. So what we have here is the Event Graph tab. You're starting hopefully to get a feel for what this does. We have this onOpen request coming from code. The white line is an execution flow, and it's triggering a setting of an actor rotation. And for the moment, we've just parameterized that right in here and said, when the request comes through, immediately set the rotation to 80 degrees, which has the rather unfortunate effect of still just having the door open, boom, like that, instantaneously. So that's what first thing we want to improve. We want it to open over time. So how do we do that? Well, if you right-click on your blueprint, you've got all sorts of categories in here. And at the very bottom, you've got Add Timeline, or you could just search for Timeline. You get several things then, but you'll still want Add Timeline. So let's do that. Let's add a timeline. Okay, what is this timeline thing? Let's take a little look at it. I'm just going to reduce the number of tabs I have hanging around so that we can focus on what we're doing here. In fact, I don't even need the components right now. Okay, that's better, isn't it? We can see what's going on. So what this does is if you double click it, you'll see that you actually have a set of curves, or we can create a set of curves to do with the timeline. So let's do this. Get your timeline down, double click it, which will open up the curve editor, and let's add a float track. There are various other types of vectors, events and things, but let's just worry about float for now. We're just going to use a floating point value between 0 and 90 degrees to control the opening of the door. So you add a float track. We're going to call this float track open angle. Now let me just give you the big picture for a minute. You don't need to follow me for a second. If I add another float track, it could be something else. Okay, and then what this curve editor is doing, if you click in the right place and scroll up and down, is you can collapse down these different tracks, open angle and something else. Let's just go back to the event graphs. Look what happens. They get exposed as floats on the right-hand side of this timeline block. Okay, you can rename the timeline block if you like by right-clicking it, rename, and call it door swing, because this is what it's going to do. And what's going to happen is when something comes in on the left-hand side, like for instance the open door request, it's going to start playing the door swing timeline. And then these values, the open door and something else, are going to change over time according to the curves. Okay, so we don't need something else. So I'm going to delete that by right-clicking and delete. We only need an open angle curve. So you see this is updated. We just have an open angle float output. So right-click. Add key to float. Now, by the way, you can either completely follow me along with this right now. I do want to tell you that your challenge is going to be to set up your own curves in a moment for your door, to your eye. So you can either do it now as we go, or you can watch me do it, and then I'll give you an opportunity to pause and do it yourself in a minute. So we add a key. This is like a keyframe. Now, you can adjust it by dragging it around, and you'll notice the time and value are changing. So around here is around 0 time, the start. We have an angle value of whatever, half a degree. So I'm actually going to click it and type in at time 0, I want an angle of 0. How do I know it's 0? Well, let's go inspect the door for a moment. There's the door. Have a little look at it. Details. You see that the rotation is 0, 0, 0. What do we want the rotation to end up? Well, we want it to end up minus 90, remember? So, back to your curve editor. Add another keyframe. Click it. Then time, say, I don't know, I think I'll get my door to open over 2 seconds to minus 90 degrees. Now your scale's all messed up. You can't see anything. You can scroll around with the right mouse button, zoom in and out with a mouse wheel, but this isn't really the way to do it. This button here towards the top left of the graph zooms to horizontal fit. The other one zooms to vertical fit. So that's what we want to do. Now we can see our curve. It's a straight line opening over a period of 2 seconds. Well, we could have done that in code easily enough. So why have we made all this? Why have we gone to all this trouble? Well, right-click on one of the nodes and select it to auto interpolation. There are various different types. Auto as it says, creates automatic tangents. You see how what's happened there? I can now change the curve using these tangent handles, and that is the power of actually doing it here in the node editor. Once I've set one node to auto, I can change the curve appearance. You wouldn't want it to swing past necessarily, past 90 degrees. You might a little bit, but I just want mine to be a smooth curve. This is much, much harder to do in code, and we can add other keyframes and move things around, and we can make them like break nodes, which means you get a sudden change. You break that tangent, or you can make them user nodes or auto nodes, which are nice and even. Lots of different options to play with, but I'm just going to have 2 keyframes, and I'm just going to go smoothly like that. Okay. The other thing is the length. You need to look at the length of the animation. If I have 2 seconds here and I have 5 seconds for the length, let's see what actually happens before we fix the problem that I know is going to happen. So we've just got a 2-second animation. Don't worry about the length. You'll see the consequence of that in a minute. Let's take the open angle as a float. Now we can't, it's green, right? It's a float. And what this rotation wants is a rotator if you hover over it. We can't just put a float into a rotator. It says float is not compatible with rotator. So what we do is you drag the float into the middle of nowhere, type the word rotator, and you can see make rotator. Now, what do you want to plug float into? Is it roll, pitch, or yaw? Well, let's look at the door and remind ourselves what's going on. Minimize this. Look at the door. This is pitch, remember? This would be roll of the door. And this one here is yaw. So the Z is yaw we're looking for. If you want to move a line that you've made, you either right-click and say break, or you can hold down Control and you'll move from this selector to a hand, and then you can drag to a new position. So we want open angle to go into the yaw node, and out of that comes a rotator. You see the color. It's a the color there is a rotator into the new rotation. So this is just a cast or a change of type. Okay, pretty cool, right? So if we just run this now, let's try it. I'm going to put this on the right-hand side, and you can put your game on the left-hand side. And you don't even need to compile your blueprint, by the way. If you play the game, the blueprint will compile. Now watch what happens when I get on the pressure pad. You can see the execution line. You see what's happening here? The red on the right-hand side there is saying that I've got a continuous firing of this open request into the play node. All right? Now, the door hasn't moved because we need to wire the update of the door swing into the set actor rotation. Because what's happening is the set actor rotation, each of these nodes, well, straight value changes can happen in an instant, right? But the rest of these nodes have to happen on an update. And there is no tick come execution pin or tick coming into set actor rotation. So on the update of the door swing like this, we do that. All right, we could do it from an update tick node, but why bother when we have an update coming out of the door swing? So let's see what difference that's made. It'll make sense in context, I'm hoping. Let's play now. Alt-P is an easy way of doing that. Now you see the execution goes through, and the door swings nicely. Now we have a problem with the closing of the door, but we'll deal with that in a moment. You see what's happening there? So it's now, when I step back on the plate, what's happening is the animation has finished. Let's look a bit more closely at this bit here. Door swing paused. Okay, let's start again and just analyze this carefully. Door swing, 1 second. 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds. You see that the animation is 5 seconds long, and yet we've only got 2 seconds worth of the door swinging. Let's watch that again. The door is fully open after 2 seconds per our curves, but the animation is lasting for a full 5 seconds, okay? So that is what I meant when we go into the curve editor about the length. We don't want to have to manually change this length every time to match this last keyframe. So you click Use Last Keyframe. Now this value isn't changing, that's a bit annoying. It may change if we're really lucky, but doesn't seem to want to. Let me just come out and go in, see if it changes. I don't think it will. No, it doesn't change, but it has changed. Let's watch. Oops, sorry, back into the node editor, get it on the right-hand side, get the event graph up, and we're going to watch this time here, paused, 0, and let's just play again and see what happens. And the percentage, you see the total percent gets to 100% at 2 seconds now. So this means that your curve and your animation length are the same, because you can have multiple curves. You could be doing lots of things, to lots of different axes of movement. We just want the whole animation to end when the time gets to the last keyframe. Ignore this 5. It's being overridden by use last keyframe. It's not a brilliant interface. So we're there. In the next video, what we're going to do is add another node, as you can see on this slide, called onCloseRequest, and we're going to make that run the whole timeline backwards. Don't do that now. I'm just telling you that that's what we're going to end up doing. What I do want you to do now is to, if you haven't already caught up with me, I want you to pause the video, build your own blueprint, set your own curves how you want them, and just do everything on this diagram except the onCloseRequest, okay? Because we'll be covering that in the next video. And I'll see you in the next video.